December 29th, 1962, 2:34 a.m, Jack Thornton sat in the cab of a Comacox Gritter lorry, watching the temperature gauge drop past -18°C on the A38 near Burton-on-Trent. He'd been driving for 11 hours straight. The grit spreader behind him had frozen solid twice. His convoy, 7 trucks working a 30-mile stretch of motorway, had cleared the same section 4 times in the past day. The snow kept winning. Standard procedure said rotate crews every 8 hours. Rest the equipment. Wait for conditions to improve. Thornton kept driving. Behind him, Britain was freezing solid. The coldest winter in 200 years had arrived 3 days before Christmas and showed no signs of stopping. Roads were vanishing under ice, villages were cut off, power stations were running out of coal, and the forecast said this would last weeks. It lasted 3 months. In the next 90 days, Thornton and thousands of Grittiers drivers across Britain would work the longest continuous snow operation in the country's history. They'd battle temperatures down to -22°C, lose dozens of trucks to mechanical failure, pioneer techniques for extreme duration winter operations, and prove that the system Albert Morrison had improvised in 1947 could survive anything nature threw at it. This is the story of the forgotten 1963 Big Freeze, and the Gritter crews who kept Britain moving through the longest winter anyone could remember. The cold arrives. The meteorologists saw it coming but didn't believe the numbers. On December 22nd, 1962, a massive high-pressure system settled over Scandinavia. Cold Arctic air began flowing south across the North Sea. Weather stations in Scotland recorded -15°C, then -18, then -20. The system didn't move, it just sat there, feeding cold air into Britain day after day. By Boxing Day, the entire country was locked in a deep freeze. The Thames froze, so did the Mersey, the Tyne, and dozens of smaller rivers. Snow fell continuously across the Midlands and North. Drifts reached 12 feet in exposed areas. Temperature records fell across the country. Braemar, Scotland, -22°C on January 18th, 1963. Coldest temperature recorded in Britain since 1895. Sheffield -20°C sustained for 48 hours. London. The Thames completely frozen for the first time since 1814. This wasn't a storm. Storms pass. This was a meteorological siege. Jack Thornton learned about it the hard way. He'd been a Gritter driver for the Staffordshire County Council since 1958. Former lorry driver, 41 years old, married with 3 children, solid, dependable, experienced with winter operations. He'd never seen anything like December 1962. The first week was manageable. Standard gritting runs, clear the main roads, drop salt and grit mix on icy patches, 12-hour shifts. Thornton and his crew handled it. Then the temperature dropped further and stayed down. By December 29th, the night Thornton sat in that frozen cab on the A38, the situation had changed. This wasn't weather response anymore. This was infrastructure survival. The problem was simple physics. Gritter trucks worked out by spreading a mixture of rock salt and grit onto frozen roads. The salt lowered the freezing point of water. Roads stayed clear, but that only worked down to about -12°C. Below that temperature, salt became less effective. The chemical reaction slowed. Ice formed faster than salt could melt it. And Britain was experiencing sustained temperatures of -15 to -20°C across huge areas. The Gritters were fighting a losing battle against thermodynamics. The equipment challenge. The Gritter fleet of 1963 was Morrison's legacy, evolved. By 1962, Britain had approximately 2,400 purpose-built gritting lorries, mostly Bedford TK and Commer QX chassis, diesel engines, heated cabs, theoretically, mechanical spreaders mounted on the rear, standard capacity 5 tons of grit-salt mixture per truck, standard range 30 miles before reloading, standard operating temperature down to -12°C. Nothing about the 1963 Big Freeze was standard. Thornton's Commer QX had been built in 1960. Good truck, reliable, but it wasn't designed for sustained operation at -20°C for weeks at a time. The problem started immediately. Diesel fuel gelling in the tanks. The fuel would crystallize at extreme cold, clogging fuel lines and filters. Solution: add kerosene to thin the diesel. Risky, but it worked. Hydraulic systems freezing. The spreader mechanism relied on hydraulic fluid to operate. At -18°C, standard hydraulic fluid thickened into sludge. Spreaders stopped working. Drivers had to manually shovel grit off the back of moving trucks. Battery failure. Cold drained batteries fast. A truck that sat idle for 2 hours in -20 Celsius often wouldn't restart. Drivers learned to keep engines running continuously, 24 hours a day sometimes. Tyre problems, rubber became brittle at extreme cold. Tyres cracked, blowouts increased. Replacement tyres were in short supply because every truck in Britain was operating at maximum capacity. The salt itself became problematic. At -15 Celsius and below, rock salt didn't dissolve properly on road surfaces. It just sat there in chunks. Crews started experimenting with different grit mixtures. More grit, less salt, crushed volcanic rock, sand, anything that provided mechanical traction rather than chemical melting. By early January 1963, maintenance crews were improvising solutions Morrison would have recognised, wrapping fuel lines in insulation, rigging auxiliary heaters for hydraulic systems, installing dual batteries. The trucks kept braking, the drivers kept fixing them, the roads had to stay open. The human system. Jack Thornton's typical shift in early January 1963. 0200, start truck. Let engine warm for 20 minutes while checking grit load, spreader mechanism, fuel levels. 0-20, depart depot. Begin route. A38 from Burton-on-Trent to Derby, then a 516 loop, return via A50, total distance, 67 miles. Estimated time, 6 hours including grit refills. 0240, first spreader malfunction, hydraulic system frozen, pull over, manually clear mechanism with blowtorch, resume. 0315, complete first A38 pass, road already re-icing. Visibility 30 yards in snow. 0400, refill grit at Derby depot. 25-minute stop, engine stays running. 040, second pass begins. Temperature -19 Celsius. Spreader working but dispersal pattern irregular. 0600, assist stranded lorry. 2-ton delivery truck stuck in drift. 30 minutes lost pulling it free with tow chain. 0700, return to Burton depot. Refill grit. Mechanical inspection. Fuel filter replaced. Hydraulic fluid topped up. 0745, resume route. Third pass of same 67 miles. 1000, rudder fails completely. Manual grit distribution begins. One crew member shoveling from moving truck bed, while Thornton drives. 11:45, lunch break, 20 minutes. Thermoses of tea frozen solid. Eat cold sandwiches in running cab. 1200, continue operations, repeat until 1800, then hand truck to night crew and go home. Except Thornton often didn't go home. The night crew was short-handed. Someone had to keep the routes clear. So he'd grab 4 hours sleep in the depot break room and start again. This continued for 12 weeks. Across Britain, thousands of drivers were running similar schedules. The gritter service, as it was informally called, operated under crisis protocols, mandatory 12-hour minimum shifts, voluntary extensions as needed. Most drivers worked 16 to 20 hours, 7-day weeks, no days off during peak freezer periods, overtime pay suspended, flat daily rate regardless of hours worked. The drivers accepted it, not because of patriotism or heroism, because the roads needed clearing. Same reason Morrison had given in 47. By mid-January, the human cost was mounting, chronic sleep deprivation among crews, drivers falling asleep at the wheel, multiple accidents, frostbite and cold-related injuries, 37 drivers hospitalized in January alone, family strain, drivers barely saw their families for weeks, mental exhaustion, the endless repetition, clear the same road, watch it re-ice, clear it again, wore people down. Jack Thornton developed a stress fracture in his right hand from gripping the frozen steering wheel. He didn't report it, just wrapped it and kept driving. What else was I supposed to do, he said years later. The roads needed clearing. Morrison's words echoed across a generation. The strategic problem. By late January 1963, the Ministry of Transport faced a logistics nightmare. The big freeze wasn't breaking. Forecasters now predicted it would continue through February, possibly into March. Britain's grit stockpiles were depleting faster than anticipated. Pre-freeze estimates, 500,000 tons of rock salt and grit mixture in strategic stockpiles. Estimated to last through a severe winter with normal resupply. Actual consumption by January 25th, 420,000 tons used. 6 weeks into the freeze, projected shortage date, mid-February if consumption continued at current rates. The problem was compound. Not only were trucks using more grit per mile due to ineffectiveness at extreme temperatures, but they were also running more passes over the same roads. A route that normally needed gritting once per day in winter now needed 4 to 6 passes per day. And resupply was failing. Rock salt came from British mines in Cheshire, Teesside, and Northern Ireland. The mines were running at maximum capacity, but transportation was the bottleneck. Rail lines were frozen, canals were solid ice, trucks could barely operate. Grit, crushed rock and stone came from quarries across the country. Same transportation problem, quarries were producing. The material couldn't reach the depots. By early February, gritter crews in some regions were making do with whatever they could find. Sand from coastal areas, crushed brick from demolition sites, cinder from coal plants. The system was improvising again. Just like 1947, the ministry issued emergency procurement orders, import 100,000 tons of rock salt from Poland and Germany, requisition all available rail capacity for grit transport, authorize gritter crews to use alternative materials at local discretion, extend shift lengths to 18 hours maximum. That last order was meaningless. Drivers were already working 20-hour days voluntarily. The February crisis, February 1963, was worse than January. If January was cold, February was Arctic. The high-pressure system that had settled over to Britain in December showed no signs of moving. Another month of sustained -15 to -20 Celsius temperatures, snow depth across the Midlands and North, continuous cover averaging 18 inches, drifts in exposed areas exceeded 20 feet. The Thames remained frozen solid. People were ice skating on it in London. Newspapers ran cheerful stories about the Great Freeze parties. Gritter crews weren't celebrating. Jack Thornton's convoy lost 2 trucks to mechanical failure in the first week of February. Engine blocks cracked from cold, irreparable. The fleet was shrinking while the workload increased. Replacement trucks didn't exist. Every available vehicle in Britain was already operating. The remaining drivers absorbed the lost capacity. Longer routes, longer hours. On February the 9th, Thornton worked a 23-hour shift. Not because he was ordered to, because the night crew's truck broke down and someone had to cover their route. He fell asleep at the wheel twice, woke up when the truck drifted onto the shoulder, kept driving. This was happening across the country. The gritter service was running on fumes, literally and figuratively. Fuel was rationed, driver exhaustion was universal, so equipment was failing, but the roads stayed open, barely. The Ministry of Transport later calculated that during February 1963, Britain's gritter fleet was operating at 180% of design capacity. Trucks running 18-20 hours per day when they were designed for 8-hour operations. Drivers working 80 100-hour weeks when the maximum recommended was 48 hours. Unsustainable. But what choice was there? The innovations nobody recorded. Desperation breeds creativity. February 1963 produced dozens of small innovations that never made it into official reports but spread through the gritter network by word of mouth. The auxiliary heater. Modification. Crews rigged propane camping stoves inside metal boxes attached to truck undercarriages, positioned near hydraulic system, kept the hydraulics warm enough to function. Dangerous. One truck caught fire in Leeds, but effective. The dual fuel system, mixing kerosene with diesel prevented fuel gelling, but the ratio mattered. Too much kerosene and the engine ran rough, too little and the fuel still crystallized. Drivers found the sweet spot, 15% kerosene at -15 to -18 Celsius, 20% below -18. The manual override spreader. When hydraulic spreaders failed, crews welded simple lever-operated chutes that could drop grit by gravity. No hydraulics needed. Crude, but they worked. The rolling start protocol? Batteries failed constantly in extreme cold. Crews developed a buddy system. One truck would tow start another truck with a dead battery. Saved hours waiting for replacement batteries. The continuous operation doctrine. Never shut the engine off. Ever. Trucks idled at depots between runs. Fuel consumption tripled, but it prevented restart failures. None of this appeared in official Ministry of Transport documentation. It was driver knowledge, passed depot to depot, crew to crew. Morrison's legacy wasn't just the hardware, it was the mindset. Figure it out, make it work, keep moving. The breaking point. Late February pushed the system to collapse. On February 23rd, the coldest night of the entire freeze, temperatures across central England hit -21 Celsius. Jack Thornton's thermometer showed -20.5 at 3 a.m. on the A38. His spreader had been manually operated for 6 days. The hydraulic system was beyond repair. 2 crew members rode in the truck bed, shoveling grit by hand while Thornton drove at 8 miles per hour. The grit itself barely worked. At -20, rock salt was nearly useless. The roads were re-icing faster than they could be cleared. Thornton made a decision. Instead of continuous light gritting, standard procedure, he switched to concentrated drops. Heavy grit application at critical points. Hills, curves, intersections. Ignore the straight sections. Focus resources where accidents would be catastrophic. Other crews independently reached the same conclusion. By late February, gritter operations across Britain had shifted from keep roads clear to keep roads survivable. The difference mattered. Traffic didn't flow normally, but it flowed. Slowly, carefully, but roads remained passable. The alternative, complete closure of major routes, would have meant economic catastrophe. Food distribution would have stopped. Coal deliveries to power stations would have halted. Britain would have faced not just a freeze above, but a collapse. The gritter crews prevented that. Not through heroics, through stubborn, exhausted persistence. The thaw. March 6, 1963. Temperature in Burton-on-Trent, -2 Celsius. Thornton noticed it immediately. -2 felt tropical after 3 months of -15 to -20. The high-pressure system was finally moving. Warmer Atlantic air was pushing in from the west. The siege was breaking. By March 10th, daytime temperatures across southern England reached above freezing. For the first time since December 22nd, 78 consecutive days of below-freezing temperatures ended. The snow began melting. Then flooding began. 3 months of accumulated snow, hundreds of millions of tons of frozen water melted in 2 weeks. Rivers overflowed. Drainage systems, frozen for months, couldn't handle the volume. Towns flooded across the Midlands and South. The gritter crews pivoted again, from ice management to flood response, clearing drainage channels, opening culverts, distributing sandbags. Nobody had told them to, it just needed doing. By late March, Britain thawed completely. The -63 Big Freeze officially ended on March 29th, 97 days after it began. Final statistics. Duration, 97 days of sustained below-freezing temperatures across most of Britain. Coldest temperature, -22.2 Celsius, Braemar, Scotland. Grit consumed, approximately 685,000 tonnes, 37% more than total national stockpile. Gritter trucks destroyed or damaged beyond repair. 247 vehicles. Driver injuries. Over 400 cold-related injuries requiring medical treatment. Driver fatalities. 3 deaths. 2 from vehicle accidents during operations. 1 from heart attack attributed to exhaustion. Economic cost, estimated £100 million in 1963 currency, equivalent to roughly £12 billion today. Deaths attributed to the freeze, approximately 240 direct deaths from cold exposure, accidents, and related causes. That last number would have been far higher without the gritter crews. The unrecorded achievement. Jack Thornton returned to normal gritter operations in April in '63, 8-hour shifts, routine winter maintenance. It felt absurdly easy after 3 months of crisis operations. He never received official recognition for the winter work, no medal, no commendation. His pay for January through March 1963 was standard wages, plus a small emergency operations bonus of $7. Most drivers received similar treatment. The big freeze was over. Life moved on. The gritter crews went back to regular duty, but the Ministry of Transport noticed something in their post-freeze analysis. Despite the worst winter in 200 years, despite sustained temperatures 8 to 10 degrees colder than any winter since 1947, despite equipment failures and resource shortages, Britain's road network had remained operational. Not perfect, not normal, but functional. Food had reached cities. Coal had reached power stations. Emergency services had maintained response capability. The country had survived. The gritter system worked. Specifically Morrison's system, decentralized operations, driver to discretion, Improvised solutions, persistent effort, had scaled to handle a crisis far beyond anything Morrison faced in 1947. The ministry drew 3 conclusions. 1. Grit stockpiles needed to be tripled. Future freezes would require massive reserves. 2. Equipment needed cold weather hardening. Trucks designed for -25 Celsius operations, not -12.